In this video, we're going to be talking about the Summoning and Endless Spells articles that came out referring to Age of Sigmar 2.0.
Okay.
Welcome, Wargamers. My name is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and like I said, we're talking about the Summoning articles, which is a big one, and then also the Endless Spells, kind of a preview of what they have coming into the game. Before we dive into that, though, head over to this address, to my Instagram account, and that where you can follow my hobby progress, see some cool stuff, things I'm working on. Right now on the docket, I have finishing up my Slaves to Darkness for 2.0 when that's released, and I just bought a whole bunch of Moon Clan Grots, which are kind of on the shelf for now, because I want to have the Chaos stuff ready to roll, and also Genes to their Cult for 40k, so go ahead, check it out. It's awesome. We're having a good time over there. I took a little bit of time off just to kind of recoup and relax. I'm not really a news guy. I don't do a ton of stuff every week when it comes to putting out videos, and so I needed a little break. But in the meantime, some huge things happened. So let's go over to the community page here and scrolling down. So a bunch of stuff came out, but the ones we're really interested in is Summoning, a little bit of this Gash one, and the Endless Spell. So let's dig in. I actually want to start with the Gash one because it does point to something very minor, which has huge ramifications. Basically, they're talking about how Legions of Gash was affected by the change, and they do make it clear with the Maggotkin book, Daughters of Cain, and Legions of Gash that since they were all made, you know, the new logo they have, that's supposed to be kind of their idea of transitioning to 2.0. So all the battle tomes that have that new logo are kind of built specifically for the new edition, which is great. It means they had this in mind. And I'm trying to find it here, but there is a line in here. It's right here. It gets better when you consider that you can use the same command ability multiple times in the same turn. This is a huge one. We talked about command abilities and things like that. I had suggested that probably going to have the rule of ones where you can only use it once, but they straight up say you can do it more than once. Now, put this in a few things out there. It doesn't mean it costs the same, so it could be something they kind of thought about on Warhammer Weekly with Vince Ventrella, and you can use it once for one command point, and then it costs like 3 to use the same one again from somebody else. Those kinds of things. There's all kinds of levers that can be pulled. So we'll just have to see how that pans out. So I'm just being honest and pointing out that I was incorrect about something. But man, when you go back to this article, what they're talking about when they say that is the way that synergies are going to stack for death units, and it's pretty insane how you can 240 attacks, 480 attacks, all out of the huge blob of skeleton warriors with a bajillion buffs layered on them. Now this would spend just about every command point that you would get throughout the game. Like you wouldn't use any your first or second turns, so your bank gets big and you blow the whole load on this whole one attack. 480 attacks will bring down anything in the game pretty much, and so that's kind of the cost benefit there. So it's just kind of interesting. We'll see how that pans out. So let's go back here. That's really the only thing that's unique about the Gash article, though. And so Summoning. First off, let's just start by saying that I was wrong about something. It was my assumption going forward that Slaanesh was going to be the only one to get the free summoning thing. And I guess I didn't make a declarative statement that they will be. I just said if they're the only faction that does it, this will be a very unique thing wholly unto them, which is true. But they came out and said in the Summoning article that all factions, all summoning, period, is going to be free. Now, we're going to read through the article. What I think is good about this, before we go any further, is this makes a lot of minor rules so much clearer. So, for example, like when a vampire queen kills a dude, or kills a hero and has a chance to make a vampire lord because she seduces him and turns him into a vampire during the battle, like that was something super thematic, but nobody wanted to pay points for it because it was an off chance that it would happen, and how many points do you set aside for something like that? So it clears a lot of those things up, and that's definitely a positive. But as we're reading this, and in my gaming group, my local guys with Rerolling Ones have a lot of reservations, so let's go back here. And they acknowledge that summoning is one of the most thematic parts of Age of Sigmar, and I absolutely agree. They kind of go over a few examples. So the Seraphon, obviously summoning good guy demons, I guess you would say. Korn, Nurgle, all those, here's a good depiction of pretty much all the factions that summon stuff. I didn't realize that there was quite a bit of summoning mechanics in Sylvaneth. I didn't realize that until I started looking over the battle tome after this article. And really, this is probably the shortest of the release things they have. Most of it's pictures. And what they're basically saying is rather than summoning units through magical spells, every army that could summon units before now has a unique resource that allows them to bring fresh reinforcements onto the battlefield, blah, blah, blah. If you've got Magcamp, Nurgle, Legions of Gash, you've played with rules like this already. So, if you're not familiar, Maggotkin, when they re-released the book, none of the Demons of Nurgle have the typical summon, for example, Plague Bears. Summon Plague Bears. Every Chaos Wizard knows this. That kind of thing that we had with the initial release of Age of Sigmar. And the reason is because you can only summon those things via contagion points, which is a resource that you accrue throughout the game through different things. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways to get contagion points in Maggotkin. Much like Legions of Nagash, where you pick grave sites, and that's how you kind of manipulate summoning. What else is there? The Slaanesh one they just teased, where your hero is inflicting damage but not killing anyone, and taking damage but not being killed, is how you rack up, I think they called it, I forgot what they called it, some kind of point value. And so this is kind of the vision they had going forward. When we talked about those with the Slaanesh one, that was kind of my assumption, that going forward there's going to be a narrative device, some kind of resource management system in all of these books to help you bring characters and stuff like that in a thematic way so that it doesn't deprive your wizards of opportunities. We talked about that, and I think in that sense, this is a great idea. I mean, moving towards a more thematic way of doing the things that armies want to do without depriving them of opportunities for their own personal spells and things like that, I think is great. The thing is, and here's my reservation, I'm going to be very honest with you. I played during 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and we had a pretty competitive scene up here in Seattle. A lot of them, when I first moved up here, that's actually what got me back into Warhammer, was seeing the Fantasy Battle guys play. And the thing is, nobody could beat a death guy. And death games, like the mirror match of vampire counts, it would just draw. And the reason is, when your enemy's coming at you, you would just summon zombies. And then zombies weren't meant to kill anything. They would just go tie a unit up. And you just do this ad infinitum because there were no reserve points or anything like that in Fantasy Battles 8th edition. And so the problem was games became about two things. One, stalling your opponent. And two, who could buy the most models, right? If you're a summoning guy and there's no cap on what you can put into your list, who can buy the most? And so to kind of preface all of my concern, it's not negative, I don't have a negative thing to say about it, is I don't want that. Because it's not fun, 4 hours of a game that ends in a draw where you're just frustrated because you can't get to your enemy and all they do is keep putting chaff in your face. And it's just not fun. However, I do think that this is one of those times where this is like a trust fall. If you're not familiar with a trust fall, it's when you put your arms like this, and it's like a trust exercise. The guy you're supposed to learn how to love and respect and trust is behind you, you lean backwards, and he catches you, right? Of all the previews of the new edition that have come out, this is the hardest one for me to be like, I totally trust that you guys know what you're doing. Everything else, right? With the command abilities, I'm like, well, if the skeleton warriors and all their many stacks of command abilities and all that garbage is so insane, I'm sure if I just took the time to learn my faction enough, I could find something else that's really cool. And I have been, and it's a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Like, I can rationalize that if this is really good, then there's probably something really good for me. But as someone who, if I want to play Slaves to Darkness, and they make all of the demons, they lose their summon demons by a spell thing, and it goes straight to being that resource mechanic, that's a large part of chaos that I don't have access to. I could still take a mark on everything and become Maggotkin of Nurgle and become Tzeentch, and that's cool. But not being able to summon stuff, it's different. So that's kind of the thing there. And like I said, what I don't want is those grindy games where no one feels like they're playing, right? And that was the biggest thing, is it felt like a non-game back in 8th edition. Now, we've come a long way in game design, in community outreach and feedback and the way they receive those things. If it came out that Age of Sigmar became that again, right? About who has the most money and who can grind their opponent at the most, I have zero doubt with their track record over the last 3 years that would be changed in 6 months. Zero doubt. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to wait. And so those are my only real reservations. If you ask me, like, thematically, like, look at these pictures, right? When it comes to summoning, the Slann bringing forth all these crazy awesome creatures, a bunch of bloodletters who, I like that scheme. I've never seen the black body and red head, or red limbs, I should say. This, just in general, Nurgle, and there's apparently a feculent Narwhal back there. You know, these are the things that make me excited about these armies. The idea of them bringing forth these beings. And so, like, bringing those things thematically, I think is a huge win. How it's going to work game-wise is the only part that I have reservations on. Like I said, this is the trust fall exercise. This is when I say, friends, I don't have a good answer for you, but I am personally going to be choosing to be very excited about it. And I choose to trust that they know what they're doing. They gained so much information when they do things like, some way summoning works in 40k is very interesting to me. If you don't know, it's like your Chaos Wizard can choose not to move. Instead, I think it's roll 3 dice, and whatever the power level equivalent of that is, they can summon that thing to the board. It does come out of reserve points there, but it's a very interesting mechanic where heroes can really interact with those things. And I'm very interested about that. Point is, they have been very obviously collecting data about ways of balancing games and making them interesting, and so I choose to trust them that this is going to make sense. Like I said, this one above all others is the hardest pill for me to swallow. Let me see here if I have any more notes on this one. I don't. That's the biggest thing. It'll just require time to get a sense of what this really does. So let's go back to the main one, and we're going to go over to Endless Spells. And they kind of recap, like, hey, we saw, what's the Pokemon? Is it Grimer or something like that? No, it's not Grimer. I don't remember the Pokemon looks like that. What are Endless Spells? Endless Spells are a new kind of magic that ranges from predatory magics that indiscriminately annihilate anything in their path to utility spells that provide cover against ranged attacks and heal units. To put it very, very simply, if you want to look over some of the cool things in this article, they explain three very important things in this. Okay, 1, Endless Spells are a type of spell that you will cast once, and then it will never go away unless your opponent unbinds it, and every turn they get a chance to unbind it. Like, instead of casting a spell, they can say, I'm going to try to unbind that thing. So let's say in your first turn you summon this nasty maw thing, which I will certainly be buying, because this exact scene with the shaman on the Balewind summoning the big maw thing is literally what's going to happen with my Moon Clan Grot army. Straight up, okay? Let's say my first turn, I summon this guy to the board. He's going to stay on the board until my opponent in their hero phase tries to unbind it. And every single turn they can try to unbind it. And that's very, very cool. So you could let it ride, you could not, depending on how much of an effect it's having. And that is kind of the nature of, they're calling them Endless Spells. They kind of bounced around different terms in the community articles. They went persistent, there was another one, a third one, I think with a P, but Endless is the one for this article. So, it's very interesting. My understanding is this is supposed to represent magic being unchained, as Nagash does his kind of nefarious things and screws up with magic, the essence of magic in the realms. Spells that would normally dissipate are just sticking around a heck of a lot longer. They mention that there's some wizards who basically become bounty hunters, hunting down spells to destroy them so they can keep people safe. And that's just so awesome thematically. Yeah, and so, like it says here, Endless Spells are just like normal spells, but rather than resolving their text with a mere roll of a dice, each summons a model to the table. This miniature then persists throughout the game until it's dispelled. Wizards can choose to do this in place of casting a spell normally, meaning you'll have to weigh up the choice between disrupting your enemy's magic and using some of your own. Now, that's the first thing, is what they literally are. The second thing is so freaking cool. So we knew from another article that there's going to be a buff to going second, and we didn't know what that meant. And how this works is there's a sort of new pseudo phase, I guess you could call it, the kind of endless spell phase. It's not officially what it's called, but basically, after you roll off to see whose turn it is, right, or who takes priority, I guess I should say, that is when the endless spells on the table activate. Okay, if they have a model like that big maw thing, if you go second, you get to control that. Okay, let's go back here to the article and see here. Endless spells are moved at the start of each battle round after determining who gets the first turn, with players taking it in turns to pick a spell to move, starting with the player that has the second turn to the round. You'll be able to move any endless spell with this move, not just the ones you control, representing their wild and untamable nature. Summon a suffocating graveyard, I don't know what that means, and you might find yourself needing to volunteer to take the second turn in a row to stop your opponent from sending it crashing into your own units. So this means if I summon this big maw thing, right? Like I said, turn one, throw up the maw thing, I feel good. And then the turn round comes around and I win, and I take the first turn again. My opponent, who's going second, gets to take control of my maw thing, which I just summoned. And that means it's near my army, so he can send that thing right back into my Garrote Shaman. So the buff that we've been looking for to going second is that you get to control endless spells. Now, here's the thing. This is a two-part thing. We don't know what all the endless spells are going to do yet. We don't know how they fit into matched play. That's not a huge deal for me. I'm mostly playing narrative stuff, but we don't know yet. If they are permanently a fixture in matched play, this will be huge. The reason is now you're adding some serious cost benefits depending on how many are on the table to these actions. And it's utterly insane to think that like you could summon this, what I'm assuming is free because it's just a spell, giant maw thing, and then your opponent, if you make them go second, is going to pile that straight back into your face. It's going to deepen how and why and when you cast these things to make these units come to the table. And given the right positions, especially later in games, there's just fewer units on the table, you're going to really need to think about who gets the first chance to move one of those suckers, because if you have very few units or they're weaker dudes just holding an objective and one of those endless spells comes back to bite you in the butt, that's going to be game changing. So like I said, we've been waiting to see what the bonus to going second will be. I think that's pretty darn cool, especially because it's easy to think of scenarios where players have 2 or 3 of these things on the table because they look cool, and why wouldn't you want to play with them? But what's fascinating is those early turns where there's only maybe 1, maybe 2 of them on the table, right? That first going into second battle round, whoever gets to control the one first is probably going to have either the only one or one of 2, maybe. And so he's going to have a much bigger effect, especially because at that point, they're probably going to be closer to the armies that made them. So you have to, when you summon one of those things first turn, you have to be prepared if your opponent forces you to go second in the next battle round to eat that. And so it's just, it's kind of hard to explain a little bit, but it's very exciting that you summon these things, but there is a point in time where you have limited control over them. And so I think that's interesting. Tells me right off the bat that summoning just one of these things might not be the best way. If you're going to do it, go big and get like 2, maybe even 3, because that way your opponent can't take your only option that you have going towards them, turn around and have it go back at you. They have to choose between one or the other and put them in a rough spot. And I think that is definitely the way to do it. So that's kind of the big thing. So that is what endless spells are, how they relate to getting a bonus in turn 2 of the game, which is what we've been looking for. And then the last thing, this is kind of the same stuff. They're going to redo the Bellmen Vortex, which is great, because frankly, if they're creating a new class of spell, the Bellmen Vortex is exactly what fits into that. It's a spell, you cast it, it makes the model, and it has in-game effects. And so I think that's absolutely awesome. I think it was a question that needed to be answered in light of this article, because right now the Bellmen Vortex, I hate it. I hate the Bellmen Vortex right now. And I'll tell you why. It's because it's a no-brainer that costs you nothing. And I know it has an actual point cost, but it doesn't really cost you anything, because in the face of a Gaunt Summoner on one, you just might as well just build into the price of the Gaunt Summoner. The thing is so freaking good. Same thing with Croak and all those guys. So I'm hoping they're going to turn that down. They just said that they've given a complete overhaul to bring it in line with the rest of the Endless Spells, which is exciting. I think that's really great. So that's kind of my big note. We're going to look at some examples here. I should back up. They gave 2 examples of Endless Spells. One's the Purple Son of Saish, who is Coughing. That's his name, the Pokemon this guy looks like. Coughing. Purple Sun, and this is a great insight into what these War Scrolls are going to look like. Southern Purple Sun, you cast on an 8, which is pretty beefy of a cast for some of these guys. If successfully cast, set a Purple Sun within 6 inches of the caster. That is important, because remember, if you make your opponent go second next round, they can control the Purple Sun. He's only 6 inches away from the person who summoned it. And if you look predatory, Purple Sun of Shyish is a predatory endless spell. It can move 9 inches and can fly. That means he can literally turn around and kill the guy who summoned him. So we're seeing already the cost benefit to these spells and also going second. Swirling Death. When this model is set up, the player who set it up can immediately make a move with it. So you're going to be moving away, obviously with the 9 inches. So he won't be like prime right there, but he is still in range. Basically, if your caster moves 3 inches forward, he can still reach him. What caster doesn't move 3 inches? I don't know. So I think it's great. End given form. After this model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across, and each other unit that has... Sorry, I have a microphone in my way. I'm trying to look here. And each other unit that is within 1 inch at the end of its move is subject to the Purple Sun's baleful energies. For each unit subjected to the baleful energies, roll a dice equal to the number of models in that unit. For each one of a 6+, the unit in that model is slain. Sorry, a model in that unit is slain. If the wound's characteristic of 6 or more, it suffers 2d6 mortal wounds instead. So, for every unit it passes over, and each other unit that is within 1 inch of it at the end of its move. If you move over something, or if you end its movement and there's an enemy unit in 1 inch of it, you roll a die for every single model in that unit. On a 6, it's just dead. There's no range. If you park this thing within 1 inch of 60 of my Moonclan Grots, I'm going to roll 60 dice. On 6, they take a mortal... Oh, sorry, on a 6, they just die. If you park it next to a large unit of Iron Guts are 4 wounds each. They just die. If you park it next to a large monster, it suffers 2d6 mortal wounds. This thing is a wrecking ball of death. Another rule, Visage of Zerus. Yes. Okay. Subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic of all units while they are within 6 inches of this model. All units, friend and foe, keep in mind. Empowered by Shyish, if your battle is taking place in the realm of death, this model can move 12 inches instead of 9. So, that's a lot to digest. This is definitely one of the predatory ones, obviously. I wonder if predatory, that word, is going to be like a copy and paste thing across, like the giant yellowish maw thing. Interesting. I think this one is just so freaking cool. It has, swingy results because it is based on a 6+. Interesting that it says 6+, because I wonder if there's going to be some mechanic to make this better, like a 5+, which would be absolutely nuts. Maybe there's a rule for Shyish the Realm, not just this thing, that gives it more. I don't know, but the mechanic is there to be built upon in the future. So that is exciting. So that is this guy, the Purple Sun. And if you look, that's a pretty darn big model. That's a 32 mil base, I believe, for the Necromancer. And that is a big old thing. So anything in an inch of that, or something that it crosses over. Beefy, just in a word. And now the other one, which is very interesting, is the Umbral Spell Portal. This guy is 2 models, and we've actually seen this before. This was the one during the pre-releases where there's a black orb and a white orb, and I couldn't figure out what I was looking at here. I believe this is supposed to represent Ulgu. Yes, shadows. So let's see here. casting value of 5, so much lower. If successfully cast, set up the first Umbral spell port, one of the orb guys, wholly within 12 inches of the caster. Then set up the second Umbral spell port, wholly within 18 inches of the first. Okay, so let's retract that. So you have your spellcaster here. It has to be within 12 inches of him and then 18 inches of the other one. So you can get a pretty huge line. So that could be, is that 30 inches of range? I believe. I'm not crazy. Okay. Arcane Passage. If wizards successfully cast a spell while they are within 1 inch of the Umbral spell portal model, the range and visibility of the spell can be measured from the other Umbral spell portal model from this endless spell. If a predatory endless spell finishes a move within 6 inches, I'm just going to call it a spell portal model, remove it from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere within 6 inches of the other one from this endless spell. So basically, it's act like a, I don't know, like a radio tower almost. So if you have, let me back up here. Sorry, getting all bounced around with my transitions here. So basically how it's going to work is you cast this thing, and then if you're standing within 1 inch of one end of this kind of two-part model, if you're within 1 inch, you can cast the spell as if you were standing wherever the other one is, 18 inches away. So if you have a spell like Arcane Bolt, which is 18-inch range, and you're within 1 inch here, you can do 18 inches from the second one, which is huge, because that way you can shoot magic in all kinds of weird directions. You can hurl it straight down the field. You can get different angles and things like that, get units you wouldn't be able to do before. So it acts, yeah, like I said, like a radio tower. The spell goes in one end and pops out the other. And I think that's really interesting. The second part of that, the predatory spell, it's just a way to punish you. I mean, really, because it's kind of a way to rein it in. So if that first guy, the purple sun, parks itself right next to this thing, one of those ends has to move to within 6 inches of where the other one is, effectively neutering it, but it's still a great effect. And the last part of that is, it's here, empowered by Ulgu. If your battle is taking place in Realm of Shadow, the second Umbral spell portal model can be set up within anywhere on the battlefield instead of within 18 inches of the first. So that's pretty nuts. So what we're looking at here is more of a utility spell, but one that doesn't go away, and that's pretty awesome. Your opponent either has to dispel it, which is not hard on a 5, right? Because they have to beat 5. But it could say you had, I'm trying to think how to do this. If you took a necromancer and had him summon this with his one spell, and then you took someone who's super nasty with magic, like parked Gash next to this thing within 1 inch, Gash is firing all the spells that all Death Wizards know, 18 inches from the opposite, like wherever the other end of the spell portal is the starting point of those spells. So immense range. If you're able, I don't see anything about you can't set it up within 4 inches of a model. So whatever those super tight, doesn't he have a spell that's like 3-inch range or something like that? Like it just auto kills junk. Those kinds of spells can happen, and that's going to be super nasty. Again, it'll probably be dispelled immediately, but that's okay because this is a reoccurring thing. You can just keep redoing this, and that would be really, really mean. So they talk about just basically telling you to go buy some wizards because cool stuff's coming. Thematic magic was one of their kind of pillars for what the new edition was supposed to be. And so I would agree with them. Go buy some wizards. They did an article on Skaven, which didn't really tell us much. It looks like they're still keeping the Skaven parts of clans. Interesting to note that they say if you're building an Eshin army, which right now is about 6 models, so you can't really do that. My gut reaction is they're going to finally give clan rats the keyword to take a different clans, kind of like Chaos Warriors have for all the different Chaos Gods. That's my gut reaction. I don't have any proof of that. And the Flesh Eater Courts is basically just talking about, hey, isn't it so great that summoning's free? Because now you can really use some of those dudes. And they do legitimately, I think, have some of the best small heroes in the game. In terms of command ability stacking and things like that. So, friends, that is pretty much it for the news. We are all caught up. I'm so thankful that y'all are paying attention with me. If you like the series, as we're kind of counting down to second edition, or the new edition, as they're calling it, let me know. Let me know. I'm happy to do these things. It's a lot of fun. It's very quick to get these things out, and I love hearing that. I want to hear your thoughts on free summoning and endless spells. Free summoning, like I said, I'm on the fence about. I have to see how it fits into the whole thing before I get too upset or anxious or anything like that about as far as game balance goes. But I trust them, and so I'm asking you to do the same. As far as endless spells go, I'm incredibly excited. I love the fact that they added the cost benefit to going first or second, especially if you're someone who uses endless spells. And I just think it's going to be really, really cool. So, friends, tell me your thoughts and leave it in the comments down below. And I'm going to be hitting the lore videos here in just a minute. I'm very excited to get back to them. And later this week, I actually have a special where Jess, my wife, is going to be on the show talking about women in wargaming and things like that. So, have a lot of cool stuff coming. Friends, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend if you're in the U.S. and look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar video. Thanks so much for watching, and happy wargaming.